It's vegan recipes with Pat and Emily.
Hey guys, thanks for stopping in. Today I'm going to share our recipe for pickling and canning beets. Let's get started. Here are some beets that we have grown. We've already washed them and cut the tops off. We decided to sort them by size because it will be easier to get them all perfectly cooked this way. If your beets are all the same size, you don't need to do that. I've covered my beets with water and I'm going to get them boiling. FYI, because I will be adding these smaller beets later on, I have made the water deeper than I usually would. At this point, the beets are still pretty hard when I try to poke them with a knife, so I will let them cook for another few minutes and I'm going to keep them covered. Now I'm going to get my brine ready. Vinegar, I'm gonna add water, sugar, cinnamon, allspice, and cloves. I'm just gonna stir this all together. Bring that up to a boil and then reduce the heat. I wanted to show you this before I got this boiling because you won't be able to see. I don't have like a canning pot for this or anything. I am just using a big metal pot and I have a metal trivet in the bottom to keep the jars from touching, and I am going to sterilize my jars in this. I also wanted to show you that I want to sterilize more jars than that. So this is actually a steamer and I will be able to sterilize these jars on top, and then I'll put the bands and lids in there to get hot also. To check these beets, I will poke them with a knife and it is going in a little bit. So I'm going to add the small beets. Return the lid and bring them back up to a boil. I am checking the beets, and as they go on the knife and then slide off like that, calling that done and pulling them out. You really don't want them to be overcooked. That one's done too. Done. And then I have a bowl of water in the sink that I am going to transfer these into. I'm adding some more beets to the water. I would usually just use cold water, but the water is off due to some work in the neighborhood, so I'm adding some ice. Then you can start to feel the skin like move around and peel off. You're gonna want to cut the top off and the bottom if it's still there, and then just peel that off. Sometimes it's easier to do it in the water, but you won't be able to see what I'm doing. Also, if your beets are overcooked, you will end up with mushy pickled beets, so it's better to pull them out a little early. They'll be getting hot again when we can them. Also, there is a little bit of a timing thing for this. Once you pull them out of the boiling water and put them in the cold water, you're going to want to get to this. You're not going to want to let it sit. Here are all of our peeled beets, and now we're gonna cut them up. As I'm cutting my beets up, I'm filling my jars. You are going to want to leave a ½ inch of headspace at the top of these. I would recommend using gloves if you don't want pink hands, and always having old tea towels on hand for this. Now I've got my brine over here. I'm going to ladle it into my jars. You can see I have one jar that's not full the whole way, and I will just leave that as refrigerator beets. I won't actually can it. After they're full, you want to get the air bubbles out. Make sure everything's pushed down in the liquids. They will probably pop back up a little bit. Wipe off the edge, the lid, and a band, and this will go into our hot water bath. I'm gonna start putting my beets in here. I'm gonna get all of the cans in here. Except for that one that's not full, we'll just put a regular lid on that, let it cool, and then put it in the fridge. You really don't have to can these. You could just make like refrigerator beets. I'm gonna get this up to a boil. Our jars are all done in the water bath, so now we will just set them out. You are gonna want to let them set until they all pop and cool off. Just heard we got one of them to pop. I'm gonna keep pulling the rest of these out. It's the next day. I took the bands off, washed the jars, and labeled them beets and put the date on it. I always label them on the top because when I store my canned goods, this way I can just look at the top and see what they are. These are the ones that we didn't have a full container, so we didn't actually can these, we just put them in the fridge. We also left these ones without salt in them, but you can add salt to taste if you would like. What a rich, delicious flavor. A great addition to salads or just as a side. I hope that you give this a try and stop back and see what we're cooking up next week.